The Catharian Republic had known peace for over 300 years. 7 different alien species lived together across 42 star systems, sharing technology, culture, and dreams of a better future. The blue-skinned Aquarians controlled the water worlds, while the crystal-bodied Luminites managed energy production. Plant-like Verdants grew food on agricultural planets, and the insect-like Chitons handled manufacturing with their precise limbs. But peace doesn't last forever. The first warning came from Scout Station Alpha 7 on the Outer Rim. Commander Velen, an Aquarian with gills that fluttered nervously, stared at his sensors in disbelief. Massive shapes moved through space, each one larger than their biggest warships. They weren't ships in any traditional sense. They were alive, breathing, pulsing with biomechanical parts that defied understanding. "Contact the High Council immediately," Velinari ordered his crew. "Tell them the Devourer swarm has found us." The swarm had been a legend for centuries, whispered about in dark corners of space stations. Some called them the galaxy's greatest nightmare. They didn't just destroy planets, they consumed them completely, stripping away every atom of useful material and leaving behind empty space. No one knew where they came from or what drove their endless hunger. Within hours, the outer colonies went silent. The swarm moved like a plague across Catharian space, their bioships growing larger as they fed on captured resources. The Republic's defensive fleets fought bravely, but their weapons barely scratched the organic hulls of the invaders. Admiral Vekfar, the Republic's top military commander, watched helplessly as his forces crumbled. "We need help," he told the High Council during an emergency session. "Our weapons are useless against them. Who would help us?" asked Counselor Zephyr, her crystalline body dim with despair. "We've had no contact with other civilizations for decades." That's when someone remembered the humans. Earth and its colonies existed on the far edge of known space. Humans had made contact with the Republic 50 years ago, but they'd chosen isolation. They traded occasionally, but kept to themselves, building their own worlds and solving their own problems. Most aliens considered them primitive and aggressive. Ambassador Velinari's cousin and the Republic's best diplomat, made the desperate decision. From the communications center on the capital world of Kairos Prime, he began broadcasting across all known frequencies. "This is Ambassador Velinari of the Catharian Republic," his voice carried across the void of space. "We are under attack by an unknown enemy. Our worlds are dying. Our people are fleeing. If anyone can hear this message, please help us. We have children here. We have families. We don't want to die." The message repeated every 10 minutes, growing more desperate as swarm forces closed in on the capital system. Most Republic citizens had given up hope. Their fleets were scattered, their planets evacuated, their future looking darker with each passing hour. But 3 days later, something unexpected happened. Admiral Jack Thompson sat in his command chair aboard the UES Liberty, humanity's flagship. The grizzled veteran had fought pirates, explored unknown systems, and kept the peace in human space for 30 years. His crew respected him, and his superiors trusted his judgment completely. "Sir, we're receiving that alien distress call again," reported Communications Officer Danny Walsh, his young face serious. Thompson had been listening to the broadcasts for days. The desperation in the alien's voice touched something deep inside him. Humans understood what it meant to face extinction. They'd nearly destroyed themselves twice before reaching the stars. "Get me a connection to Earth Command," Thompson ordered. "It's time we had a conversation about helping our neighbors." The Human Defense Council wasn't enthusiastic about getting involved in alien wars. Earth had problems of its own, and resources were always tight. But Thompson's arguments were compelling. 7 species are about to be wiped out, he told the council members during the emergency video conference. "If we don't help them, we'll be next. This swarm won't stop with just them." After 6 hours of heated debate, the council reached their decision. Humanity would send exactly one fleet to investigate the situation. Nothing more, nothing less. Thompson smiled grimly as he received his orders. One fleet might not sound like much, but humans had always been good at making the impossible happen with limited resources. Captain Mike Davis had seen plenty of battles in his 20-year career, but nothing prepared him for what waited in the Catharian system. As his destroyer, the UES Ranger, dropped out of hyperspace, the first thing that hit him was the smell. Even through the ship's filtered air system, something felt wrong, like death and decay mixed with burning metal. The view screen showed a nightmare. Kairos Prime, the beautiful capital world he'd seen in diplomatic photos, was covered in smoke. Massive biomechanical creatures, each the size of a city block, wrapped around orbital stations like parasites. Their organic hulls pulsed with veins of green energy, and smaller attack craft swarmed around them like angry insects. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Bobby Chen from the weapons station. "Those things are huge." Davis watched as a cruiser fired its energy weapons at one of the bioships. The beams hit the organic hull and simply disappeared, absorbed like water into a sponge. The creature responded by extending a tendril that punched straight through the alien ship's armor, draining it of power in seconds. "Sir, Admiral Thompson is ordering all ships to engage immediately," reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. "No time for standard battle formations." Davis grinned. Standard formations were for fighting other ships with predictable weapons and tactics. These bio-creatures were something entirely different, which meant humans could throw the rulebook out the window. "All ships, this is Davis. Forget everything you learned at the academy. We're making this up as we go." He turned to his weapons. "Officer Bobby, how many nuclear mines do we have left from that asteroid clearing operation?" 12, sir. But regulations say we can't use them near populated worlds." Regulations didn't account for space monsters eating entire planets. "Launch them in a spread pattern, then bring us about for a ramming run." The human fleet moved unlike anything the Catharians had ever witnessed. While alien ships maintained careful distances and fired from safe positions, human vessels dove straight into the swarm formations. The nuclear mines detonated in brilliant flashes, tearing holes in bioship formations and creating chaos among their ranks. Commander Elver, watching from his command ship at a safe distance, couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Are they insane?" he asked his tactical officer. "They're flying directly into the enemy formations." "Sir, one of the human ships just lost its main engines," the officer reported. They're not retreating. Instead of pulling back for repairs, Captain Davis ordered his damaged destroyer straight toward the largest bioship. The Ranger's hull groaned under the strain as emergency power diverted to the forward shields. At the last second, Davis activated every explosive charge they had on board. The collision was spectacular. The Ranger punched through the bioship's organic armor like a bullet, exploding deep inside its body. Green fluid sprayed into space as the creature writhed in apparent agony, its energy weapons going dark. "Did you see that?" shouted Lieutenant Commander Frank Wilson from his escort frigate. "The captain just killed that thing with one ship." Other human captains took note. Within minutes, damaged vessels were deliberately ramming bioships instead of retreating for repairs. The swarm creatures evolved to drain energy weapons and absorb conventional attacks. Had no defense against kinetic impact delivered by desperate humans willing to sacrifice everything. Admiral Thompson, coordinating the battle from the Liberty, finally managed to establish communication with the Catharian forces. Admiral Vekvar's image appeared on the main screen, his blue-tinted face showing a mixture of amazement and horror. "Admiral Thompson, what are your people doing?" "They're destroying their own ships." Thompson studied the tactical display showing human vessels cutting through swarm formations like hot knives through butter. "We're winning, Admiral. Sometimes that requires sacrifice, but the cost, your losses, are acceptable if they save your worlds. Thompson interrupted. How long have you been fighting these things? 3 years. We've tried everything. Energy, weapons, particle beams, quantum torpedoes. Nothing works. Thompson nodded. That's because you're fighting them like they're ships. They're not ships. They're animals. And animals have weak spots, instincts, and fears. You just have to be willing to get close enough to find them. As if to prove his point, another human vessel rammed a bioship, this time targeting what looked like a sensory cluster near its front end. The creature's death scream echoed across all frequencies, causing nearby swarm units to hesitate for the first time in the battle. The tide was turning, and the humans had been in system for less than 3 hours. Lieutenant Beth Wilson had always been good at explaining complex ideas in simple terms. Growing up with 5 younger brothers back on Mars Colony taught her patience, but teaching alien commanders how to fight was testing even her limits. No, she said, trying to keep frustration out of her voice, as she stood in the HFY war room. The holographic battle display showed their latest simulation, and once again, the alien officers had positioned their ships in perfect defensive formations. You're still thinking like you're protecting something instead of attacking. Commander Thelver, his blue skin darkening with confusion, gestured at the display. But we are protecting something. Our worlds, our people. And you'll lose all of them if you keep fighting this way, Wilson replied bluntly. She walked over to the controls and reset the simulation. Watch this. She programmed the human fleet. Movements from yesterday's battle, showing how Captain Davis and his destroyers had punched straight through the swarm formations. The alien officers watched in stunned silence as the aggressive tactics carved through enemy lines. This is madness, whispered Sub-Commander Catherine, a young chitinous officer whose insect-like features twitched nervously. Your people threw away 3 ships to destroy 1 enemy vessel. We traded 3 damaged ships for one of their biggest bioweapons, Wilson corrected. Those ships were already lost anyway. At least this way, they took something important with them. The concept seemed to physically pain the Catharines. Admiral Lekvar leaned forward in his chair, his voice careful and measured. Lieutenant Wilson, in our culture, every life has infinite value. We cannot simply calculate worth like spreadsheet. Wilson softened her tone. She understood their reluctance, but there wasn't time for gentle persuasion. Admiral, I respect that philosophy. It's beautiful, actually. But these swarm creatures don't share your values. They see your mercy as weakness and your caution as an invitation to feed. She manipulated the display again, showing swarm attack patterns. Look at how they move. They expect you to fall back, regroup, and defend. They've been fighting defensive species for who knows how long, but humans. We learned warfare from each other, and humans are the most unpredictable, aggressive species we know. Over the next several hours, Wilson worked with individual commanders, teaching them concepts that made them uncomfortable. The idea of using damaged ships as weapons horrified them. The notion of acceptable casualties seemed barbaric. But slowly, some of the younger officers began to understand. So when my cruiser loses shields, said Commander Veltan, working through a tactical scenario, instead of retreating for repairs, I should ... press the attack, Wilson finished. Your ship might not survive, but if you take out their command vessel, the smaller bioships lose coordination. Sometimes, one ship's sacrifice saves dozens of others. The breakthrough came during a small skirmish near the 3rd moon of Kairos Prime. A Catherian patrol encountered a swarm scouting group, and instead of the usual cautious engagement, Commander Velton ordered his 3 frigates to charge directly at the bioships. The results were dramatic. Caught off guard by the aggressive tactics, 2 bioships were destroyed before they could adapt. The 3rd tried to flee, something the Catharians had never seen before. They ran, Veltan reported, his voice filled with amazement. The creatures actually retreated. Word of the victory spread quickly through the Catharian fleet. More commanders began requesting training sessions with Wilson and other human tactical officers. The concept of aggressive defense slowly took root in alien thinking. But the swarm was learning too. Within days, massive reinforcements arrived at the edge of the system. These weren't the same bioships the humans had been fighting. They were bigger, more heavily armored, and they moved with new caution. The swarm had adapted to human tactics faster than anyone expected. "We've got a problem," announced engineer Tom Garcia during a joint planning session aboard Admiral Thompson's flagship. The stocky Texan had been working around the clock, trying to give the combined fleet any possible advantage. "How big a problem?" Thompson asked. Garcia pulled up technical displays showing swarm bioships. The new ones have redundant nervous systems. Ramming attacks that worked before just bounce off now, and they've developed some kind of anti-explosive enzyme. Our minds barely scratch them anymore. Wilson studied the data, her mind racing through possibilities. What about combining our technologies, human weapons, with Catherian precision targeting? "That's what I've been working on," Garcia said, excitement creeping into his tired voice. "The Catherians have these incredible energy-focusing systems, but they've never thought to weaponize them. And we have kinetic weapons they can't even imagine." He showed them schematics for hybrid weapon systems, human railguns powered by Catherian energy cores, nuclear warheads guided by alien quantum targeting computers, and most impressively, biomechanical interface systems that could hack directly into swarm creatures. "The problem is time," Garcia continued. "I need at least a week to integrate these systems, and intelligence says the main swarm fleet will be here in 3 days. Thompson looked at the tactical displays showing enemy reinforcements. The next phase of the war would test everything. Both species had learned about fighting together. The massive shape that emerged from hyperspace dwarfed everything else in the system. The swarm queen ship was the size of a small moon, its biomechanical hull pulsing with veins of sickly green light. Sensor readings showed it carried enough firepower to crack planets in half, and worse yet, it was heading straight for Kairos. "Prime Mother of God," whispered Captain Rodriguez from his battle cruiser. "That thing is 10 times bigger than anything we've seen." Admiral Thompson stared at the tactical display, his weathered face grim. Intelligence reports had mentioned queen ships in whispered rumors, but seeing one in person was something else entirely. Organic weapons pods, the size of skyscrapers, dotted its surface, each one capable of sterilizing continents. "Sir, it's charging some kind of planetary bombardment system," reported sensor technician Danny Walsh, his voice tight with fear. "Power readings are off the charts." The Queen ship's weapon array began to glow, focusing energy that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Everyone in the system knew what would happen next. Kairos Prime would be reduced to molten slag, along with the million Catherian civilians still on the surface. That's when Chief Petty Officer Lisa Martinez stepped forward with an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. "Admiral, I've been studying the biotech we salvaged from destroyed swarm ships," she said, holding up a pulsing organic component that looked like a diseased heart. "This thing is some kind of neural interface. If we can get close enough to the Queen ship, I might be able to hack into its nervous system." Thompson looked at the young engineer like she'd lost her mind. "Lisa, that ship has defensive systems that could vaporize our entire fleet. How do you propose we get close?" "We go inside, sir. Every living thing has weak spots, and these are no different. They need to breathe, process waste, circulate fluids. There have to be openings we can exploit." Before Thompson could object, Commander Thalvarez's voice crackled over the communication system. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from the planet's surface. The civilian population is refusing evacuation orders." On the main screen, dozens of Catherian faces appeared, teachers, doctors, artists, scientists, but their usual peaceful Expressions had been replaced by something Thompson recognized immediately: the look of people who'd decided they'd rather die fighting than live as refugees. "We volunteer for combat duty," announced Dr. Zephyr, an elderly Luminite whose crystal body flickered with determination. "Teach us to fight like humans." "You're civilians," Thompson protested. "You don't have military training." "Neither did your people when they first faced extinction," replied young scholar Kethron, his insect-like features set in a surprisingly human expression of resolve. "But they learned. We can learn too." Meanwhile, Martinez was already assembling her boarding team. The plan was desperate. Use captured swarm biotech to disguise a small shuttle, penetrate the Queen ship's hull through what appeared to be a waste disposal port, and fight their way to the central nervous cluster. "This is suicide," muttered Sergeant Bobby Chen as he checked his weapons for the third time. "That thing's interior is probably crawling with defense organisms." "Maybe," Martinez replied, attaching the biotech interface to her combat suit. "But if we don't try, everyone dies anyway." The shuttle launch coincided with a massive distraction attack. Every human and Catharian ship in the system opened fire simultaneously, drawing the Queen ship's attention, while Martinez's team slipped through its defenses. Inside, the bioship was like being swallowed by a living nightmare. Organic corridors pulsed with bioluminescent veins, and the air was thick with spores that made breathing difficult, even through filtered masks. Worse, the passages seemed to shift and change, as if the ship was actively trying to confuse intruders. "Stay close and follow the neural pathways," Martinez ordered her team. "These things think like giant brains, so the most important systems should be centrally located." They fought their way through swarms of defensive organisms, spider-like creatures that dropped from the ceiling, and slug things that oozed corrosive acid. Human training and weapons gave them an edge, but each step cost them dearly. Outside, the civilian volunteers were proving their worth. Catherine had taken command of a cargo hauler loaded with refugees, but instead of fleeing to safety, he turned his ship toward the Queen ship's main weapon array. "For our worlds," he broadcast on all frequencies, his voice steady despite the terror he must have felt. "For the future." The cargo ship slammed into the weapon cluster just as it was reaching full charge, causing a massive explosion that sent shockwaves through the Queen ship's hull. The planetary bombardment was disrupted, buying precious time for the ground evacuation. Other civilian ships followed Catherine's example, using cargo haulers and passenger transports as improvised weapons. Their sacrifice created chaos in the Queen ship's defensive systems, allowing Martinez's team to reach the central chamber. The Queen ship's brain was a massive organic computer, pulsing with bioelectric energy. Martinez attached a captured biotech interface, trying to ignore the way it seemed to burrow into her suit's systems. "I'm in," she reported, her voice strained as alien thoughts flooded her mind. "I can see their command structure. There, oh God, there are hundreds more ships coming." But she also saw something else: the Queen ship's weakness. Its massive size required enormous amounts of energy, and that energy was channeled through a single biological core. "Everyone out," Martinez ordered her surviving team members. "I'm overloading the power core. This whole thing is about to blow." The explosion that followed lit up the entire system, visible from dozens of light away. When the debris cleared, the mighty Queen ship was gone, and the swarm reinforcements had lost their coordination. Human aggression and alien precision had created something neither species could achieve alone: total victory against impossible odds. The Queen ship's death was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. As the massive biomechanical creature died, it released a sound that traveled across all frequencies, part electronic screech, part animal wail, part something that seemed to reach directly into the minds of everyone who heard it. The sound was pure agony, despair, and rage all mixed together. Every remaining swarm creature in the system stopped what it was doing. The smaller bioships that had been swarming around Kairos Prime suddenly went still, floating in space like they'd been switched off. Then, one by one, they began to retreat. Not the organized withdrawal of a military force, but the panicked flight of animals whose pack leader had just died. "They're running," reported Communications Officer Danny Walsh, his voice filled with disbelief. "All swarm forces are retreating to hyperspace jump points." Admiral Thompson watched the tactical display as enemy contacts winked out one after another. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were fleeing like scared children. But the victory had come at a terrible price. Half the human fleet was gone. The EU's Ranger, Captain Davis's ship, was nothing but debris scattered across space. The destroyer Liberty's Dream had sacrificed itself to save a Catherian hospital ship. Dozens of other vessels had been lost in the final desperate assault on the Queen ship. "Get me casualty reports," Thompson ordered quietly. He already knew the numbers would be devastating. The Catherian losses were just as severe. Entire orbital stations around their worlds lay in ruins. Cities on 3 planets had been partially consumed before the swarm retreated. Young Scholar, Catherine, and hundreds of other civilian volunteers had died ramming their ships into enemy vessels, choosing to fight rather than run, but they had won, against impossible odds. 2 species that barely knew each other had stood together and defeated the galaxy's greatest threat. 3 days later, Thompson found himself in the rebuilt council chambers on Kairos Prime. The Catherian High Council had invited him to a formal ceremony, though he wasn't sure what to expect. The aquatic Velinari, the crystalline Zephyr, and representatives from all 7 species sat in a semicircle, their diverse forms united in solemn respect. "Admiral Thompson," began Counselor Zephyr, her crystal body glowing with soft blue light. "We have spent 3 days discussing what happened here. Our philosophers, our historians, our military leaders, all have tried to understand how everything changed so quickly." Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He'd never been good at formal ceremonies, preferring action to speeches. "Your species taught us something we thought impossible," continued Admiral Dekvar, his blue skin bearing new scars from the battle. "You showed us that sometimes, preserving peace requires the willingness to wage war." Ambassador Velinari stood, his movements graceful despite obvious exhaustion. "Admiral, you didn't just save our worlds. You fundamentally changed who we are as civilizations. For 300 years, we believed that violence was never the answer. But we learned that sometimes, refusing to fight is the same as choosing to die. We propose a permanent military alliance," announced Counselor Zephyr. "Not just for mutual defense, but for mutual growth. Your people understand warfare in ways we never imagined. Our people understand technology and cooperation in ways that could benefit humanity greatly." Thompson considered their words carefully. Earth had always been cautious about foreign entanglements, but what had happened here went beyond politics or treaties. 2 species had bled together, died together, and won together. "I can't speak for my government," he said finally, "but personally, I think we're stronger together than apart. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and there might be worse things out there than the swarm." "There are," confirmed Dr. Veltan, an elderly scholar whose research had helped identify swarm weak points. "Our long-range sensors have detected similar biosignatures in distant star systems. The Queen ship we destroyed was likely just one of many." The alliance was formalized 6 months later, after lengthy negotiations between human and Catherian diplomats. The agreement created joint research stations, combined military training programs, and shared exploration missions. The most ambitious project was the construction of a new class of starship, vessels that combined human engineering with technology. The ships were crewed by mixed species teams, with humans providing tactical expertise and aliens contributing scientific knowledge. Admiral Thompson stood on the bridge of the first joint exploration vessel, the USKR Harmony, watching as the ship prepared for its maiden voyage. The bridge crew was a mix of humans and aliens, working together with an efficiency that would have been impossible just a year earlier. "Admiral, all stations report ready for departure," announced Captain Rodriguez, who had survived the Queen's ship battle and volunteered to command the new vessel. Lieutenant Beth Wilson, now serving as the ship's tactical coordinator, smiled from her station. "Sir, the Catherians have identified 17 unexplored systems that might contain swarm remnants. Our orders are to investigate and establish monitoring stations." Thompson nodded, feeling a familiar excitement as the ship prepared to jump to hyperspace. The war with the swarm had ended, but humanity and the Catherian Republic were just beginning their journey together. "Take us out, Captain," he ordered. "Let's see what else is waiting out there." As the Harmony jumped to hyperspace, it carried with it the combined hopes and strengths of two species that had learned the most important lesson of all, that survival sometimes requires the courage to stand and fight, no matter the cost. The galaxy would never be the same.